The command deck of the Kestari flagship hummed with tension. Matriarch Velora stood before the massive viewing screen, her forearms clasped behind her chitinous back. Her compound eyes reflected the star maps that floated in holographic light before her. 3 cycles. 3 full cycles since her daughters had vanished without a trace. Matriarch, the search patterns have yielded nothing in the outer rim sectors. Commander Theska spoke carefully, knowing how volatile Velora had become. Perhaps we should consider? Consider what? Velora's voice cut through the air like a blade. That my daughters are dead? That I should abandon them? Her mandibles clicked together sharply. Never. Expand the search grid. Include the primitive systems. Theska hesitated. The primitive systems were dozens of barely developed worlds scattered throughout the galaxy's backwater regions. Most species there had not even achieved faster-than-light travel. The Galactic Council barely acknowledged their existence. Matriarch, that will take substantial resources. The Council may question. I do not care what the Council questions. Velora turned, her imposing figure silhouetted against the stars. LYSS and Mira are out there. Somewhere. And I will find them. In the privacy of her chambers later that evening, Velora allowed herself a moment of weakness. She looked at the holographic images of her daughters, their young faces frozen in happy memories. LYSS, with her curious nature, always asking questions about other worlds. Mira, quieter but brave, always standing beside her sister. They had been on a simple diplomatic mission to the border worlds. A routine trip. Nothing dangerous. Until they disappeared. The shuttle had simply vanished from all sensors. No distress call. No debris field. No ransom demands from pirates. Just silence. The kind of silence that ate at a mother's heart, day after day, until she could barely remember what peace felt like. Velora had mobilized half the Kestari fleet. She had called in favors from allied species. She had personally interrogated smugglers, pirates, and information brokers across a dozen systems. Nothing. Her daughters had simply ceased to exist, as if the universe had swallowed them whole. The Kestari did not give up. It was not in their nature. They were a proud species, built on hierarchy and family bonds that ran deeper than any alliance or treaty. To lose a child was the greatest shame a matriarch could suffer. To lose 2 was unthinkable. Matriarch. The call came through her communicator, urgent and excited. We have something. Velora was on the command deck in moments. Report. A young technician named Prill brought up a scan on the main screen. We detected faint biosignatures matching the genetic markers of your daughters. The signal is weak, but it is definitely them. Where? Velora's hearts pounded in her chest. A planet called Earth. 3rd system from a yellow star. The locals call it Sol. Velora pulled up the planetary data. She vaguely remembered it from the galactic archives. A primitive world. The dominant species had only recently ventured beyond their own moon. They still fought wars over resources and territory. The Galactic Council had marked them as pre-contact, not ready for knowledge of the wider universe. Why would they be on Earth? Theska wondered aloud. I do not care why. Velora's voice was steel. Plot a course. Maximum speed. The journey took 2 days. 2 days during which Velora barely slept, barely ate. She ran through every possible scenario in her mind. Were her daughters prisoners? Had they crashed there? Were they injured? The biosignatures indicated they were alive, but that told her nothing about their condition or circumstances. As the flagship entered Earth's orbit, Velora studied the planet below. Blue and green, wrapped in white clouds. It looked peaceful. Deceptively so. She had learned long ago that appearances meant nothing. The biosignatures are coming from a population center, Prill reported. The locals call it Portland. On the western edge of the largest northern landmass. Can you pinpoint the exact location? Working on it, Matriarch. Prill's fingers danced across her console. The interference from their primitive communications networks is making it difficult, but, yes, I have them. A street corner in the downtown district. A street corner. Not a military installation. Not a research facility. A street corner. Velora felt confusion mixed with her determination. What were her daughters doing on a street corner? Prepare a shuttle, she commanded. I am going down myself. Matriarch, we have not established contact with the local authorities. Landing openly could violate. I am not asking for permission, Commander. Velora's tone left no room for argument. My daughters are down there. Nothing else matters. The descent was quick. Velora sat in the shuttle with 4 of her best guards, watching through the viewport as Earth grew larger. The humans had detected them, of course. Their primitive radar systems were tracking the shuttle. Velora could hear their confused radio chatter, could see their aircraft scrambling to intercept. They were too slow. By the time their jets reached the area, Velora's shuttle was already landing. The street erupted into chaos. Humans ran in every direction, screaming and pointing. Some held up small devices, capturing images. Others simply stood frozen, staring at the alien craft that had descended into their city. Velora paid them no attention. Her bioscanner was locked on the signatures of her daughters. They were close. Very close. Just around the corner of that building, near what the humans called a park. Velora stepped out of the shuttle. The humans nearby gasped and backed away. She understood their reaction. The Kestari were not small. Standing nearly 8 feet tall, with 4 arms and a chitinous exoskeleton that gleamed in the sunlight, she knew she must appear frightening to these fragile beings. She walked forward, her guards flanking her. The crowd parted like water. Some humans shouted questions in their primitive language. Others aimed their small weapons, though Velora knew those could not penetrate her natural armor. She turned the corner and stopped. There, sitting on a street corner beside a metal bench, were LSS and Mira, her daughters. Alive. They were wearing strange human clothing, cloth garments that covered their smaller frames. And they were laughing. Laughing. Sitting beside them was a human male. He was middle-aged by their species standards, with graying hair and worn clothing. In his hands was a flat box that contained some kind of food. He was sharing it with her daughters. Velora's world narrowed to that single point. 3 cycles of searching. 3 cycles of fear and desperation. And here were her daughters, sitting on a street corner, eating food with a primitive alien as if nothing was wrong. The human looked up and saw her. His eyes widened. But he did not run. He simply sat there, one hand moving protectively toward her daughters. OSS and Mira turned. Their compound eyes met Velora's. Mother? OSS said in their native tongue, her voice small and surprised. Velora's legs carried her forward before her mind could process. She needed answers. She needed to understand. But most of all, she needed to hold her daughters and know they were truly safe. Velora stood frozen for a heartbeat, her mind struggling to process what her eyes were seeing. LSS and Mira sat cross-legged on the concrete, their smaller bodies draped in human clothing that looked absurdly oversized. They held triangular pieces of something covered in red sauce and melted cheese. The human male beside them had the same food in his hands. Mother, Mira said again, setting down her food and standing slowly. We did not think you would find us here. Did not think. Velora's voice came out harder than she intended. Relief and anger warred inside her chest. 3 cycles, Mira. 3 cycles I have searched every corner of known space for you both. She looked at Elwes, who was also standing now, wiping her hands on the strange cloth the humans called jeans. Why did you not signal for help? Why did you not contact the fleet? The human stood as well. He was tall for his species, though still shorter than Velora. His face was lined with age, his clothes worn and faded. He moved carefully, placing himself slightly between Velora and her daughters. Not aggressively. Protectively. Velora's guards raised their weapons. The clicking of energy chargers filled the air. Wait, the human said, raising his hands. His voice was calm, surprisingly steady for someone facing armed aliens. Please. They're okay. I promise you they're okay. Lower your weapons, Velora commanded her guards, though her eyes never left the human. Who are you? What have you done with my daughters? My name is Carl. He spoke slowly as if choosing each word with care. I found them about 3 months ago. In the forest outside the city. They were scared and alone. He glanced at LSS and Mira. I helped them. That's all. That is all. Velora's mandibles clicked sharply. You expect me to believe a primitive human simply helped 2 alien children out of kindness? What do you want? Money? Technology? Safe passage off this world? Carl blinked. I don't want anything. They needed help. So I helped them. Velora studied him. In Kestari culture, nothing came without cost. Every action had a purpose, a benefit, a place in the hierarchy. Altruism toward strangers was illogical. Especially toward aliens who could offer nothing in return. Mother, please. OSS stepped forward. Carl is telling the truth. He saved us. Saved you from what? Velora demanded. Tell me everything. Now. Mira and LSS exchanged glances. Then LSS began to speak. Our shuttle malfunctioned. The navigation systems failed when we passed through an asteroid field. We tried to send a distress signal, but the communications array was damaged. We crashed in a forested area on this planet. We survived the crash, Mira continued. But we were hurt. The shuttle was destroyed. Our emergency beacon was not working. We did not know where we were or how to contact anyone. Velora felt her heart clench. You were injured? How badly? LSS broke her secondary arm. I had cuts and bruises. Mira gestured to faint scars still visible on her exoskeleton. We wandered through the forest for days. We were so hungry, Mother. And afraid. We did not know if the humans would hurt us if they found us. Then Carl found us, LSS said softly. Velora turned her attention back to the human. What were you doing in this forest? Hiking, Carl said simply. I like to walk in the woods. Helps me think. I heard something moving through the brush, went to investigate and found them hiding under a fallen tree. He smiled slightly at the memory. They were terrified. LSS hissed at me. Mira threw a rock. Despite everything, Velora felt a small surge of pride. Her daughters had fought back. I could see they were hurt, Carl continued. And lost. I didn't know what they were at first. Thought maybe some kind of new animal I'd never seen. But when LSS tried to speak, I realized they were intelligent. More than intelligent. They were children who needed help. So you brought them to your dwelling? Velora asked. To my apartment, yeah. It's not much, but it's warm and dry. Carl shrugged. I cleaned their wounds with what I had. Gave them water and food. They couldn't eat most human food at first, so I had to figure out what worked for their digestion. Trial and error, Mira added. Carl was very patient. Velora looked around the street corner. Humans had gathered at a distance, watching with their devices raised. Her shuttle sat in the middle of the street, blocking traffic. The whole scene was chaotic and undignified. Why here? Why are you sitting on a street corner eating this food? Pizza, Carl said. We come here twice a week. There's a shop around the corner that gives me their leftover slices at the end of the day. The girls like it. You feed my daughters leftovers? Velora's voice rose. Mother, no. LSS stepped between them. It is not what you think. Carl shares his food with us. He does not have much, but he always makes sure we eat first. Velora paused. What do you mean he does not have much? Carl shifted uncomfortably. I don't have a lot of money. I work at a community shelter downtown, helping people who don't have homes. The pay isn't great, but it's honest work. You are poor, Velora stated. By most standards, yeah. Yet you took in 2 alien children. You fed them. You clothed them. You protected them. Velora's mind struggled with the logic. For what purpose? There doesn't have to be a purpose, Carl said quietly. They needed help. I could help. That's enough. Velora stared at him. In all her years, in all her dealings with dozens of species across the galaxy, she had never encountered such a concept. Help without benefit. Sacrifice without gain. It went against everything she understood about survival and evolution. Mother, Mira said. Carl taught us about Earth. He showed us how to hide among humans. He made us hats and coats so people would not see our exoskeletons clearly. He taught us their language. He never asked for anything in return. We tried to offer him things, Oasis added. We told him about our technology, our medicine, our ships. We said when you found us we would make him rich. But he said no. He said he just wanted us to be safe and happy. Velora looked at her daughters. Really looked at them. They were healthy. Their exoskeletons gleamed. Their eyes were bright. They stood close to Carl, not with the body language of prisoners, but of children standing near someone they trusted. Someone they cared about. I do not understand, Velora said finally. Your species is primitive. Violent. You fight wars over resources. You let your own people suffer in poverty. Yet you help strangers from the stars. Carl smiled. Yeah, we're pretty messed up as a species. But that doesn't mean we can't try to be better. One person at a time. One act of kindness at a time. He looked at LSS and Mira. These girls needed help. So I helped them. It's really that simple. Velora's guards shifted uneasily. The human crowd murmured. Somewhere in the distance, sirens wailed as human authorities finally began to respond. But Velora only had eyes for Carl. This strange, poor, primitive human who had done what empires and fleets could not. He had kept her daughters safe. I need to understand this, she said. I need to understand you. Carl nodded. Okay. Then let's talk. Velora sat in Carl's small apartment, her large frame making the space feel even more cramped. Her guards waited outside, creating an uncomfortable barrier between the building and the growing crowd of curious humans. Inside, the apartment was simple. One room served as both living space and bedroom. A tiny kitchen occupied one corner. The furniture was old and worn but clean. "This is where you have been living?" Velora asked her daughters, unable to keep the disbelief from her voice. "Yes, mother." Elvis sat on the floor beside Mira, both of them seeming completely at ease. "Carl gave us his bed. He sleeps on the couch." Velora looked at the small couch. It was barely long enough for a human, let alone comfortable for sleeping. "You gave them your bed?" Carl shrugged, filling a kettle with water. "They needed it more than me. Kids should have a proper place to sleep." He set the kettle on the stove. "Tea." "I do not drink earth beverages," Velora said stiffly. She turned to her daughters. "Tell me everything. From the beginning. I need to understand what happened." Mira nodded. "After we crashed, we were lost for 5 days. Maybe 6. Time was hard to track. We were in pain and frightened. The forest was so dense we could not see the sky clearly. We tried to find civilization, but everything looked the same. We ate insects and drank from streams," OSS added. "But we were getting weaker. My arm hurt terribly. Myra's cuts were starting to smell bad. Infected, Carl called it later. I found them on a Tuesday," Carl said, pouring hot water into a chipped mug. "They were huddled under a tree, barely moving. OSS tried to scare me off, but I could see they were in trouble." He sat down in the only chair. "I'm no doctor, but I've seen enough injuries at the shelter to know infected wounds when I see them." "Carl carried me," Mira said softly. "The whole way back to the city. Several miles. OSS could walk, but I could not put weight on my leg." Velora felt something twist in her chest. "You carried her? Why not call for assistance?" Carl laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Call who? The police? The military? These are alien kids, Velora. If I'd called anyone official, they would have been taken away. Locked up in some government facility. Studied. Probably never seen again." He sipped his tea. "I couldn't let that happen. So you risked yourself instead." "Wasn't much of a risk. Just had to be careful." Carl looked at the 2 young Kestari. "I brought them here late at night. Cleaned their wounds with what I had. Hydrogen peroxide, bandages, basic first aid. For Elwis's broken arm, I had to improvise a splint. It worked," OSS said, extending her secondary arm. "It healed straight and strong." Velora examined the arm. The healing was good, though not as perfect as Kestari medical technology would have achieved. But it was functional. More than she would have expected from primitive medicine. "The first week was hard," Mira said. "We could not eat most of Carl's food. Our digestion is different from humans. We got sick several times. I started experimenting," Carl explained. "Tried different foods in small amounts. Found out they could handle most vegetables, some grains, certain proteins. No dairy. Definitely no processed sugars." He smiled. "The pizza we eat now is special made. The shop owner knows to hold the cheese when it's for them." "You told others about them?" Velora's voice sharpened. "Just Tony at the pizza place. And Susan at the shelter. People I trust." Carl met her gaze steadily. "I couldn't keep them hidden completely. They needed to go outside sometimes. Fresh air. Exercise. So I got them hats and long coats. Told people they were my nieces visiting from out of town. Most folks didn't look too close. We learned to walk like humans," OSS said, demonstrating a modified gait that hid the natural articulation of her legs. "Carl taught us to keep our extra arms hidden inside the coat. And he taught us English. Every night," Mira added. "After Carl came home from work, he would spend hours teaching us words. How to read. How to understand human culture." Velora looked around the apartment again. One plate sat in the sink. A single towel hung in the bathroom. The refrigerator hummed quietly, and through its clear door she could see it was mostly empty. Some vegetables. A carton of eggs. Nothing abundant. "You have very little," she observed. "I have enough," Carl replied. "But you shared this, enough, with my daughters. You fed them from your own supplies. You gave them your sleeping space. You spent your time teaching them." Velora leaned forward. "In my culture this makes no sense. You had nothing to gain. They could offer you nothing. You are not family. Not even the same species. Why?" Carl was quiet for a moment. "Your culture sounds lonely." "Lonely?" Velora's mandibles clicked in confusion. "Yeah. If everything is about what you can gain, about hierarchy and benefit, then you never really connect with anyone, do you? Carl set down his mug. Humans aren't perfect. We're violent sometimes. Greedy. We make terrible mistakes. But we also have this capacity to care about others. Even strangers. Even aliens who crash land in our forests. This capacity, Velora said slowly, it serves what evolutionary purpose? Does it need one? Carl asked. Maybe we just do it because it's right. Because when you see someone suffering and you can help, you should help. It's that simple. Nothing is that simple. It is for me. Carl looked at Elyses and Mira. These girls were scared and hurt. I had a home, some food and time. I shared what I had. That's all. Mira stood and walked to Carl, placing her hand on his shoulder. He also protected us, Mother. There was a night when someone tried to break into the apartment. Carl stood between us and the door with a metal bar. He would have fought to keep us safe. It was probably just a drunk neighbor, Carl said dismissively. But yeah, I wasn't going to let anyone hurt them. Velora watched the interaction. Her daughter touched this human with obvious affection. Trust. Perhaps even love. These were emotions the Kestari reserved for family. For those proven worthy through years of shared hierarchy and mutual benefit. Yet Carl had earned it in 3 months. With nothing but kindness. At the shelter where you work, Velora said. You help other humans there? Yeah. We provide meals, temporary housing, job assistance. Whatever people need. And what do they give you in return? Nothing. That's not the point. Carl smiled. The point is they need help. So we help them. This is common among humans? Common enough. A lot of people volunteer. Donate. Look out for their neighbors. Carl paused. A lot of people don't too. But enough of us try. Enough of us believe we're supposed to take care of each other. Velora sat back, her mind working through this new information. The Kestari built their entire civilization on clear hierarchies. Everyone had a place. Everyone provided value to those above them and received value from those below. It was efficient, logical, stable. But it was also exactly what Carl had called it. Lonely. I need time to process this, Velora said finally. I need to understand why you do what you do. Take all the time you need, Carl said. But I'm not giving them up without knowing they'll be okay. Velora's eyes narrowed. You dare make demands of me? Yeah, Carl said calmly. I do. Because for 3 months, I'm the one who's kept them safe. I'm the one who's fed them and taught them and made sure they were okay. So yeah, I get a say in what happens next. The apartment fell silent. Velora's guards would have struck Carl down for such insolence. Her commanders would have called it an insult requiring response. But Velora just looked at this poor, stubborn human who had cared for her daughters. And for the first time in her life, she felt respect for someone who had nothing to offer but compassion. Very well, she said. Then help me understand your species, Carl. Show me why humans help. The morning sun cast long shadows through the windows of the downtown shelter. Velora stood in the corner, her presence causing nervous glances from the humans who shuffled through the food line. Carl had invited her to see his work, to understand what he did every day. She had accepted, though her guards remained close, watching everything with suspicious eyes. Morning, Carl, an elderly woman said as she reached the serving counter. Her clothes were dirty, her face weathered by years of hard living. Morning, Margaret. Carl smiled warmly and filled her plate with eggs and toast. How's that cough doing? Better, thanks to those tablets you gave me. She looked at Velora nervously. Is she real? Very real, Carl said. Don't worry. She's just visiting. Margaret nodded slowly and moved along. The next person in line was a young man with hollow eyes and shaking hands. Carl served him without comment, adding extra portions to his plate. Velora watched this pattern repeat. Person after person came through the line. Some were old, some young. Some thanked Carl, others barely made eye contact. But Carl treated each one the same. With dignity. With kindness. These people give you nothing, Velora observed after the breakfast service ended. They don't have anything to give, Carl replied, wiping down the counter. That's why they're here. Then why serve them? Because they're hungry. Carl looked at her. Do you only help people who can help you back? That is how society functions. Exchange of value. Maybe your society. Not ours. Well, not the good parts of ours anyway. Carl hung up his apron. Come on. Let me show you something else. They walked through the shelter. Carl stopped to talk with several people. A mother with 2 small children who needed information about housing programs. A veteran who wanted help filling out medical forms. An older man who just seemed to need someone to listen to his stories. Carl gave them all his time. He made phone calls. He filled out paperwork. He listened. And he never once asked what they could do for him in return. "This is your work every day?" Velora asked. 5 days a week. Sometimes 6 if they need extra help. "And your payment?" "Barely enough to cover my rent and food." Carl shrugged. "But it's enough." Velora watched a young woman enter the shelter, a child clinging to her hand. Her face was bruised. Carl's expression darkened when he saw her. "Jenny," he said gently. "You came back." "I left him," the woman said, her voice shaking. "I finally left him. But I have nowhere to go. We'll figure it out." Carl guided her to a chair, brought her water, spoke quietly with her while someone else watched her child. After several minutes he made more phone calls. Found her a bed in a women's shelter across town. Arranged transportation. "You do this often?" Velora asked after Jenny left. "Help people escape bad situations?" "When I can." Carl's face was sad. "Humans hurt each other sometimes. But we also help each other heal. That's what this place is for." Over the next 3 days, Velora continued to observe. She watched Carl share his lunch with a homeless teenager. She saw him give his jacket to a man shivering in the cold. She witnessed him spend hours helping someone practice for a job interview, even staying late after his shift ended. And slowly, very slowly, she began to understand. Humans were not bound by hive instincts like some species. They were not driven by strict hierarchical programming like the Kestari. They chose their actions. Each individual decided whether to help or to harm, to give or to take, to care or to ignore. Carl chose to help. Again and again. Without reward. Without recognition. Simply because he believed it was right. "Your species confuses me," Velora admitted one evening as they walked back to Carl's apartment. LSS and Mira walked ahead of them, pointing at shop windows and laughing at street performers. "We confuse ourselves sometimes," Carl said. "The Kestari are efficient. Everyone has a role. Everyone contributes to the collective strength. But you humans, you waste resources on those who cannot contribute. You help those who can never repay you. It is illogical. Maybe. But it's also beautiful." Carl smiled at a street musician and dropped coins into their case. "We're all just trying to get through life. Sometimes you're the one who needs help. Sometimes you're the one who can give it. It balances out." They turned onto Carl Street and stopped. A crowd had gathered outside his building. Angry voices filled the air. Velora saw humans holding signs with harsh words. "Aliens go home. Earth for humans. Send them back." "Oh no," Carl muttered. A man with a megaphone stood on the steps. "We know they're here. We know Carl Peterson is harboring aliens in his apartment. This is our planet. They have no right to be here." Velora's guards moved forward, weapons ready. But Carl held up his hand. "Wait. Let me handle this." "They are hostile," Velora said. "They're scared. There's a difference." Carl walked toward the crowd. "Carl, don't," one of the protesters shouted. "Get away from those things. They're dangerous." Carl stopped halfway between Velora's group and the protesters. "Listen to me. These are children. They were lost and hurt. I helped them. That's all." "They're aliens," the man with the megaphone yelled. "They could be here to spy on us, to study us, to prepare for an invasion." "Does LSS look like she's preparing an invasion?" Carl pointed to the young Kestari who stood frozen with fear. "Does Mira look like a spy? They're kids who crashed on our planet and needed help. What was I supposed to do? Leave them to die in the forest?" "Yes," someone in the crowd shouted. "No." Carl's voice was firm. "I'm not doing that. I'm never doing that. If someone needs help, you help them. I don't care if they're from across the street or across the galaxy. They're not human. So what?" Carl spread his arms. "They feel pain. They feel fear. They laugh and cry and love their mother just like human kids. That makes them worthy of compassion." The crowd murmured. Some seemed uncertain now. But the man with the megaphone stepped forward. "You're a traitor to your own species." "I'm loyal to being a decent person," Carl shot back. "And right now that means protecting 2 scared children from a mob." The man moved closer, his face red with anger. "You think you're better than us? I think we should be better than this." Carl didn't back down even though the man was larger and clearly aggressive. "I think we should be the kind of species that helps, not hurts. That welcomes, not attacks. That chooses kindness over fear." The man raised his fist. Velora's guards charged forward. But before anyone could reach him, other voices rose from the crowd. "He's right. Leave them alone. Carl's a good man. More people emerged from nearby buildings. People Carl had helped. Margaret from the shelter. Tony from the pizza shop. Susan and others who worked with him. They formed a line between Carl and the protesters. Carl helped me when I had nothing, Margaret said loudly. If he says these children are good, then they're good. He gave my son a job when no one else would, another man added. I trust his judgment. The angry protesters found themselves outnumbered. The man with the megaphone looked around, saw the tide turning against him and backed away. This isn't over, he muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. The crowd dispersed slowly. Carl's supporters came forward, shaking his hand, offering words of encouragement. Velora watched it all with growing amazement. You risked yourself, she said when the street finally cleared. For my daughters. Of course I did, Carl said simply. They're under my protection. You have no weapons. No armor. No physical advantage. Yet you stood between them and danger. That's what you do for people you care about. Velora looked at this ordinary human. This poor, powerless man who had somehow done what entire fleets could not. He had kept her daughters safe through nothing but courage and compassion. I understand now, she said quietly. You do not help because you must. You help because you choose to. And that choice makes you stronger than you appear. Carl smiled. Maybe we're not so primitive after all. Velora's flagship hummed with activity as the final preparations were made for departure. In her private quarters, she sat across from Carl, her daughters standing between them. The week she had spent on Earth had changed something fundamental in how she viewed the universe. My fleet is ready, Velora said. It is time for us to return home. OSS and Mira looked down, their shoulders slumping. They had known this moment would come, but that did not make it easier. I understand, Carl said quietly. They belong with you. With their people. Before we depart, I wish to offer you compensation. Velora gestured, and a holographic display appeared between them. Name your price. Technology. Wealth. I can provide you with enough resources to live in luxury for the rest of your life. You would never need to work at that shelter again. Never worry about food or shelter. Carl looked at the display showing credits worth more than he could spend in 10 lifetimes. Advanced medical technology. Energy sources that could power cities. Knowledge that would advance Earth's science by centuries. No, he said. Velora's mandibles clicked in surprise. No? You refuse. I don't want any of that. Carl leaned back in his chair. I didn't help LYSS and Mira for a reward. I helped them because they needed help. Taking payment now would cheapen what we shared. But you struggle. You live in poverty. I could change that. I'm not poor, Velora. I have everything I need. Carl smiled. A roof over my head. Food to eat. Work that matters. Friends who care about me. What else is there? Security. Comfort. Status. Those things don't make you happy. They just make you comfortable. Carl looked at LYSS and Mira. These last 3 months having the girls in my life, teaching them, learning from them, that made me happy. You can't buy that. Velora was silent for a long moment. I have traveled to hundreds of worlds. Met thousands of beings. And I have never encountered anyone like you. I'm just a regular person. No. You are not. Velora stood, her full height impressive even in the spacious quarters. You represent something I did not believe existed. Selfless compassion. Kindness without expectation. You have shown me that true strength is not in hierarchy or power, but in choosing to help those who cannot help you in return. She reached into her robes and pulled out a small crystal device. I cannot let your actions go unrecognized. Though you refuse material wealth, I offer you something else. Honorary citizenship in the Kestari Collective. Carl stared at the crystal. What does that mean? It means you are considered one of us. You may visit our worlds. Learn our culture. And most importantly, you will have the right to communicate with my daughters whenever you wish. Velora held out the crystal. This is a quantum communicator. Distance means nothing to it. LYSS and Mira can speak with you from across the galaxy. LYSS and Mira gasped. Mother, truly? Mira asked. Truly. Velora pressed the crystal into Carl's hand. You kept my daughters safe when I could not. You earned this right. Carl held the crystal, his eyes wet. I can still talk to them? Every day if you wish. Velora placed one of her hands on his shoulder. You are family now, Carl. And family does not abandon family. LYSS and Mira rushed forward, wrapping their arms around Carl. He held them both, not caring that his tears fell freely. I'm going to miss you both so much, he whispered. We will talk every day, Elwes promised. We will tell you about our home. About the stars. About everything. And you must tell us about Earth, Mira added. About the people you help. About your life. Later, on the street corner where Velora had first found them, a crowd gathered to watch the departure. But this time the crowd was not angry. Tony brought pizza for everyone. Margaret and the others from the shelter stood beside Carl. Even some of the protesters from before had come, looking ashamed and curious. Velora addressed them all through a translator. People of Earth, I came to your world expecting nothing. Your species is young. Primitive by galactic standards. You have not mastered faster-than-light travel. You still fight wars among yourselves. Many species would dismiss you as unworthy of attention. The crowd shifted nervously. But I learned something here. I learned that advancement is not measured only in technology. It is measured in how you treat those who can give you nothing in return. Velora gestured to Carl. This human showed my daughters more kindness than some of the most advanced species in the galaxy. He shared what little he had. He protected them at risk to himself. He asked for nothing. And in doing so, he taught me that humanity possesses something rare and precious. What's that? Someone in the crowd called out. The choice to be good. Velora's voice carried across the street. You are not programmed to help like hive species. You are not bound by hierarchy like my people. Every act of kindness you perform is a choice. And that makes it more valuable than any instinct or obligation. She turned to the flagship hovering above. I will report to the Galactic Council. I will recommend that Earth be granted protected status. Not because you are advanced but because you have potential. The potential to become something greater than mere technology and power. You have the potential to become truly civilized. The crowd erupted in cheers. Carl stood beside Velora, still holding the quantum communicator. Will I ever see them again? He asked quietly. In person, I mean. Yes, Velora said. When humanity is ready to join the galactic community, you will be our first official contact. You will bridge our peoples. Until then, you have my word that LYSS and Mira will visit Earth again. Perhaps when they are older, as ambassadors. I'd like that. Velora boarded her ship with her daughters. As it lifted into the sky, Carl activated the communicator. Immediately, Elwis's voice came through, clear as if she stood beside him. Carl, can you hear us? I hear you, he said, smiling through his tears. Mother says we can call every evening, Mira added. She says you are teaching us even now. Teaching you what? How to be better people. How to choose compassion over convenience. How to measure civilization not by what we build, but by who we help. Carl watched the ship disappear into the clouds. The crowd around him slowly dispersed, but many stopped to shake his hand, to thank him for representing humanity well. That evening, Carl returned to the shelter. He served dinner to the same people he had helped for years. Margaret, the young mother with bruises, the veteran with medical forms. People with nothing to give except their gratitude. And as he worked, he felt the communicator warm in his pocket. A reminder that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness create the largest ripples. That choosing to help one person can change how entire civilizations see each other. Tony brought him a slice of pizza during his break. You're famous now, you know. Everyone's talking about the human who befriended aliens. I just helped some kids who needed it, Carl said. Yeah. But that's the point, isn't it? Tony sat beside him. You proved we're not just a primitive species fighting over scraps. You proved we can be better. That night, in his small apartment, Carl spoke with LYSS and Mira through the communicator. They told him about the stars rushing past their viewports. He told them about the new family at the shelter who needed help finding housing. And across the galaxy, Velora sat in her command chamber, listening to the conversation through her own communicator. She had conquered worlds. She had built fleets. She had commanded respect through strength and hierarchy. But Carl, with nothing but kindness and a willingness to help, had taught her the most important lesson of her life. True civilization was not measured in weapons or technology. It was measured in how you treated strangers who could offer nothing in return. It was measured in choosing to help simply because help was needed. And in that choice lay humanity's greatest strength.